Hi, this is Jennifer with the Sips and Strokes Trussville Studio, and this is a video to go along with our Art to Go kits. This particular kit is the GNOME Sweet GNOME kit. If you're painting this one with me, you can go along with the video, or if you picked a different shape, you can still watch the video to pick up tips and hints for how to paint, because pretty much all these tips apply to wood in general. It's a little bit different than canvas, but pretty much these tips all apply to the MDF. If you painted before on canvas, you'll notice that wood takes the paint just a little bit differently, but it's actually a little bit easier in ways. If you have any questions about the video, you can email me through our Facebook page. It's the Sips and Strokes Trussville Studio page, or you can email me. My email address is trussville@sipsandstrokes.com. That's trussville@sipsandstrokes.com, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. You want to have a couple of supplies on hand. First, you have the 10-pack of brushes that we got with our kits. And I did notice when I opened them that there is a fair amount of wax on the bristles. So they came with nice sharp tips on them. But you want to make sure that you rinse that wax out before you paint with them, because you can see they're stuck together pretty good. So I am going to put my brush in my water cup. I like to not drop all my brushes in the cup. I like to wait until I need them, especially these pointed, your round brushes, your liners. You want to not leave those in your cup for very long, because it'll sit and it'll bend those bristles and it'll warp them. Then you won't get that nice tip again. So I'm going to set those aside, and I'm going to start with my 1/2 inch flat. It's my favorite brush, and I just have a an old cup I use as my water cup. And to kind of get that wax out, you just sort of scrub it on the bottom a little bit. Whenever you come out of your cup, you want to do a scrape on the rim, get the water out of there. And then I've got some napkins handy. And a good tip is to tap your brush on your napkin. Don't stab it, but you want to get some of the moisture out of those bristles, but you want to make sure that your brass is dry, because this metal is where water will stay, and then when you go to paint, it'll run down and it'll make a little weepy, make your paint too watery. So you want your brush kind of damp but not dripping. Then I have my paints. We got 6 bottles of paint with our kits: black, white, red, blue, green, and yellow. With those colors, you can make any color pretty much. And I also have a paint palette. You can just use a regular paper plate. If you've got one with the wax coating on it, it's better than just the paper ones. The paper ones will suck the moisture out of your paint faster. So I prefer to use a wax coated one. And actually had a plastic paint plate left over, so I'm using a plastic plate today. So I've got that, and I put my paint on my plate, and this is kind of the order I like to usually put my paint in. I do black and white, and then I do red, blue, green, yellow, because usually those are the ones you'll be mixing, and if anybody touches, it won't make a weird color. And then one of my secrets is I usually do 2 piles of white. I'll do a pile that I'll work from. I call that my dirty pile. And then I keep a clean pile of white. So you'll see how that works later. But we are going to get started. And you just want to get some paint on your brush. Just, you know, not too much, but enough to make it last for a second. Now I'm doing the gnome. So he has a white beard. And white sometimes takes 2 coats. It just depends on how it looks once you get it going. So I like to sort of get my hand warmed up a little. And then I do my brush on both sides. Gets my tips of my bristles together, and then you can use your pinky like a kickstand, and the softer you press, the smaller the line you get, and the harder you press, the thicker the line. So I'm going to outline his little nose and go along his hat. Now we started with the beard. Like I said, it might take 2 coats, But I want you to be thinking about what color you want your hat to be. With the lettering, even though it's laser etched on, I would still pick a hat color that in case you get out of the lines with your white, you can still clean it up. Like for instance, I wouldn't necessarily do a yellow hat because yellow is not very forgiving. But a color like pink or purple or teal, those are what I call the forgiving colors. If you get out of lines with your lettering, it'll be real easy to go in there and clean them up with colors like that. So I actually kind of like the coverage I'm getting. This may just be a one coat. So now that I've decided I like how the white is covering, I am using my brush strokes to my advantage. You see how I'm getting brush strokes in his beard, which sometimes you don't want brush strokes. Like if you were painting like a picture of a house or something, you'd want a nice smooth coat. But since he has a fluffy beard, I like how these kind of look fluffy. So I am going to start pulling my brush strokes into a formation like this would be his hair. So if you notice, I'm doing little short strokes as opposed to long sweeping strokes. And I'm doing them the direction that like maybe his hair would have grown. Some people struggle with this, and I think it helps if you don't think about it like you are painting his beard. If you think about it like you are brushing his beard, for some reason, that makes a little more sense to some people. And my strokes are overlapping. But I'm going to do one out here where you can see. So they're just strokes like this, like little number ones over and over. So I will probably paint from the top down and then go back and touch in there some more just to get the right coverage. And as it dries, if we decide we don't like it, all we gotta do is put another coat on it. Or maybe instead of coating the whole thing, maybe we just put some here and there. If it was hair, we'd call it highlights. I don't know if beards have highlights. I am not painting the edges of my wood. These are burnished. I think they look really nice. You can paint them if you want to, but I don't. Also because at some point you could freehand a gnome on the back side. And if you paint the edges, sometimes you get paint on the other side and you didn't mean to. So I usually don't paint my edges just to keep my options open. And I have had some that have hung outside for probably 3 years now, and I haven't had any trouble. People wonder if the moisture will get to the edges, and it doesn't seem to. Painting his little beard down here. These are going to be his little feeties. I think mine will have on black boots, so you don't have to stress yourself out too hard with these being neat, because the black in his boots will clean up anything weird. So we are closing in on having our first coat on his beard, or maybe only coat, we'll have to see. Now sometimes I'm doing my brush like this, I call it like a minus sign. Sometimes I turn it up like a number 1, and you see the 2 different strokes you get with the same brush. You can kind of turn it and change it up some, and that helps vary your brush strokes. Since you're painting something like hair that didn't fall out of a cookie cutter. So there's his beard for now. I think I'm going to leave it and see how it dries. But for now it looks pretty good. So there is his beard. I am going to paint his nose. His nose, I think I'm going to make it, I just turned him upside down if you're wondering what's going on. I am a canvas or wood flipper, I don't always paint in the same direction. It's easier if you will rotate it. Like if you were trying to paint his nose from the other way, then your hand's in the way and you can't see where you're painting. So it's always easier to me to turn it. So if you watched our paint mixing video earlier, you know that pink is just red and white. So I'm going to get me a little bit of white and put it over here. And I'm going to put just a dot of red, like the littlest bit of red. And I'm going to tap it up on my plate. I might want that to be lighter. We can always get it on there and decide if it was too pink or if you wanted to change it some. So when you get something you like, I'm going to bring it to his little nose. And see, I'm laying the brush against that line. And just let the brush do the work. Just watch that edge. And when it's something like this, it's almost more like you're pushing the paint around. Now my hat is going to be teal or aqua. So a little bit out of lines. That is nothing to worry about. And also you can decide if you are going to outline yours or not. I'm not sure. I'm going to wait and see how he comes out to whether or not I want to outline the little bit right here. So there is his pink little nose. I like it. And now I'm going to work on his hat. Or do I want to do his boots? I think I'll do his hat so it can be drying. So I'm going to turn him back around. And I need to rinse that brush. So I'm going to go to my water cup and just give it a stir. I say it's like making hot chocolate. You want to use the bottom of your cup to work your paint out. When you come out of your cup, you want to go scrape, scrape again. See that water coming off of there? And then you want to go tap, tap on your napkin. Make sure that piece of metal, make sure your brass is dry. And then sometimes I do what's called a napkin taco, where I will fold my napkin around my brush like a taco and just pull my brush through, especially these flat brushes. That gets any paint that was hiding back there out, and my brush still has a nice point on it. So I'm going to make teal or aqua, and that is green, blue, and white. If you wanted to make a different color, I have the mixing chart, and you could have received it on email if you ordered your kit from me. If you want to do a purple hat, that's red, white, and blue. A pink hat would be red and white. A teal hat would be blue and green and white. You could make a lime colored hat. That would be green and yellow with some white. You could make an orange hat. That would be yellow and red, but that one might be a little hard to clean up around on your lettering. And then I think that's probably your best choices. There's always red, blue, straight green, but anything with some white in it is going to be more helpful for cleaning up around these letters. So I'm going to make teal, which was blue, green, and white. I was looking at this pink spot right there. So blue, green, and white. So since we pumped our blue and our green next to each other, really, if you just wanted to, you could add some white between them. And then just bring these piles together. And let's see here. So there's green, blue, and white. Bringing them together. If you wanted more blue, you'd add more blue to it, or more green. Of course, more green. Lighter is more white. If you want more of a green color, you'd add more green, more blue, whatever till you find whichever color you like. And that's pretty much my personal favorite teal right there. So I've got that on my brush. So I'm going to come over here to my hat and start painting. And I'm going to start down here by his beard. I'm not going to start right by the letters because I got kind of a lot of paint on my brush. but I'm going to put my brush down. See how that cleaned up those lines where you got wiggly? So try to stay in the hat. And then I'm going to work my way up here. I'm going to get close to the letters, but I will go back and cut in on those with a smaller brush. It's just better to cover as much ground as you can with the biggest brush you can, because it puts the paint down thicker and more evenly than if you use a smaller brush. The small brush will be good for going around those letters. So I'm going to cut in here as close as I can, but try to stay off of my letters. This is actually my first time to paint one of these as well. We've not bought the laser etched wood before. Usually we sketch ours with pencil or Sharpies. So this is my first time to use this particular product. So I went around his hat over there. Now this, you'll notice, is covering better than the white. It's just because it's a color instead of being just straight white. So usually colors you get by with just one coat, especially when it's something like this that's this rich. Now you can go back with a second coat if you wanted to be thicker or smoother, or if you just wanted to. Sometimes you just get to painting and it's like, well, I just don't want to be done. So, but you can do too much. You can wish you had an undo button. So you do have to know when to stop. Almost got him. So that's everything but the letters. I'm gonna come in here where I can. The letters are going to take a while, but usually once you get started, you kind of get in a zone. So I save the letters for last too, because you want to get your hand kind of warmed up, and letters will be good toward the end when your hand has figured out what you're doing. So there's his hat for now. I'm going to drop that in my paintbrush in my water cup and stir it up, get that paint out. I'm going to let that dry for a minute. That way I don't have to worry about laying my hand in wet paint. I'm going to look at his beard. I like the way it's drying, but I still may come in there and hit him a little bit here and there, just to give his beard some interest. So come out of that cup, remember, scrape, scrape on the rim, and a tap, tap on your napkin. Get the water off that brass. And if your bristles are a little bit dirty, it's okay, because we're going into black for his little shoes. So a little bit of paint on your brush is not terrible. So since this is kind of a small area, I like to sort of get my paintbrush ready before I get to work. So I put paint on one side, turn it over, paint on the other. I do that a few times, and that gets my bristles nice and sharp, as opposed to going like this and having a big chunk. So get my brush going. And then I'll come down here to my gnome and gonna paint right up to that line of his beard, but stay out of his beard because this black is a commitment. Once you put black in here, his beard would be super hard to get back white. We might could put some white on it and make gray, give him some darker sort of undertones, but to come back and get a white would be difficult. I mean, if you had enough time and patience and did a bunch of coats, maybe got a hair dryer out, which that's another tip. I didn't get my hair dryer, but if I was doing this not in a video and wanted to keep moving, I would probably have my hair dryer. And you could dry your hat and keep moving. But if you're strategic and paint your way around him like we're doing, you can keep going and not have to sit and watch paint dry. So there's one shoe. And give him his other shoe. I like to outline and then just fill in. Now, any of these strokes we're making, down here, this shoe, they're smallish, I'll say. If you wanted to switch brushes, you could. But some people think the smaller the brush, the more precise they paint. And I actually think it's the opposite. If you use a really small brush, they're actually harder to control. They don't hold a lot of paint. And the more passes you make at it, is the more chances you have to do something that you wished was different. So that's why I like the biggest brush. Cover as much area as possible. And then switch to a smaller brush if you needed to. Whoops. Let's see. Got excited, got out of the lines. But I fixed him. So we'll let that dry. Sometimes the black really soaks into the wood, and he may need 2 coats so they look black and they don't look just dusty gray. So there's his shoes. And if you will notice, this MDF dries really fast. So like already up here where we were in the hat, like the last thing I painted was up here. That's a little bit wet because it's a thick stroke, but most of this is really dry already. So I'm going to start on cutting in there. Let's see. And you can test drive a brush before you commit to it. Let's see. I think he might be a good one for this. I'm going to use, looks like he is the number 6. He is the smaller flat brush, but he is a number 6. I'm going to go ahead and wet him. Get that wax out of the bristles. And I am not going to make you watch me cut around all these letters. I'm going to give you an idea, and then I will pause and come back to you. So we're going to get started. I got my brush and my plate, doing the both sides trick there. And maybe we'll start somewhere easy. Maybe we'll start down around this E. The harder you push, the thicker the line you get. The softer you push, the lighter the line. So some people paint really heavy, like they're angry at it. So some people have to only hold their brush with 2 fingers. That's why they get the soft, I call it the bibbity bobbity boo. You got to get your magic wand out. So this will be a good time too for me to cut away. So while you work on your letters, you can pause the video and take your time and enjoy it. But these are really good new sharp brushes. So you saw how easy that line was to make. So like I was saying, I flipped my my GNOME around. I may go down this side and only do these sides of the letters that I can see, and then I will turn him around and paint the other side of the letters. So like that E I just painted, now I flipped it around and I can paint the M, and this way I can still see where I'm going and my hand's not in the way. So I am going to step away. You work on going around your letters with your aqua or whatever hat color you picked, and then we will come back and we will pick up on the white lines. We are back for part 2 of our Art to Go kit instructional video. I just finished the teal outlining on the Gnome Sweet Gnome on his hat. Whichever color you picked, hopefully you took your time and went really slow and used that smaller brush and got a really nice coverage around your letters. So I'm going to let that dry some while I work on Mr. Gnome a little bit more. I think I will put another coat of white on his beard, and if you don't want to, you don't have to, but if you've got the paint and you've got the time, you might as well. We are currently in our little quarantine lockdown, so unless you got somewhere else to be, you might as well give him a nice beard. So I switched back to that 1/2-inch flat brush. The first one we were using, I never said, but the number on him looks like 5/6. So anyway, this is the one I've been using for the beard. So I'm going to get some white, and if you mixed a color for your hat, make sure you're using clean white. I hate when I go swoop and make sure my brush is clean too, because then there's paint hide and then you swoop and it's a color you didn't mean to get. So this time I'm going to paint from the bottom up. That's just something I do if I do more than one coat on hair or beards or feathers, something like that. So I'm going to start down here, and I'm doing the turned like a minus sign paintbrush, and I may not shoot to do 100% of the beard. I may leave a little of that first coat showing. You can see right along here, gives it a nice depth, since it is supposed to be a beard if you're looking for a little more realistic beard. Now sometimes I paint and I do what I call smooth like chocolate, like it's been dipped in chocolate. If you want that look too, that's cool. There's more than one way to butter your biscuit, but you just want to make sure that you use enough paint if you're going for that look, and you just want to make sure you're consistent. Like, to me, you wouldn't want like half of his beard like dipped in chocolate and then half of his beard with the scratchy look. And the good thing about straight white is it'll always be there. If you decide later on, you're like, wish that beard was whiter, you could always go back and do it again. So, just going kind of quick because you'll notice the second coat goes much faster than the first one. I'm gonna go easy around his nose up here. Some of my favorite things to paint are hair and clothes and feathers. It's fun because you can let the brush strokes be part of it. So there's some beard action. I think I'm happy with him. So see if you can see him a little bit better. So I think I'm happy with that beard. See one spot I want to put a little paint on. Yeah. Alright, I think I'm happy. His feet do look a little light, so I think I will put another coat of black on. But before that, I think I will do his nose again. I'm going to see what this looks like. This is just some straight white on that dirty brush. And it might make his nose too much like his beard. Let's see. Kind of pulling my strokes together. I think I liked it a little pinker. It looks super white on my phone, not quite that white in person. So I'm just gonna put a little red. There we go. Yeah. So I kind of cover all my area and then give him a good swoosh, long stroke. Sort of makes that nose have a little dimension. I like that a little bit later. Yeah. So I'm rinsing my brush. Scrape, scrape, tap, tap. I'm going to put another little coat on his shoes because I think the black did kind of soak in. And this way he will maybe be a little shinier. Now if you do want him really shiny, they do make like a clear spray paint. You can get it at Walmart or Lowe's, Home Depot. I get in the hardware department. Anytime you can find something in the hardware department, it seems to always be cheaper than in the craft department. But it's a clear acrylic. It's called Triple Thick, and it's usually $2 or $3 a can. And it is good to make things shiny. You can even seal your canvas paintings with them. It's not required, but just some people like things shiny instead of dull. So that's one foot. This foot I got out of line a little bit when I did the other part of his beard. So clean that up a little bit. And remember too, don't stress yourself out so much about lines and perfection. I know it's easy to say while I'm sitting here stressing out about lines and perfection, but nobody will ever look at this as closely as you do or as closely as you are right now. Like, think about the last time you went to somebody's house. You didn't walk up to all their artwork and get within, 3 inches of it and go, oh, wow, look at that. Things are meant to be admired from like 3 to 6 feet. So anytime something you do, you think isn't as good as it could be, or should I fix that? We always say, get up and take a step back. And sometimes we'll even take a picture with our phone and look at it on your phone. That kind of helps take you back an extra step from your painting. And maybe you'll not see what was bothering you, or maybe you'll realize, oh no, I missed that whole side of his beard. So it's always good to take in the big picture. I don't know if you see what I'm touching here. Evidently, I splashed the littlest speck of black. I worked it out of there. But if I did get black on his beard, I could always let it dry, wipe it down, come on top with some white. You could always work that into being some extra shading. So now that I'm happy with him, I think I will put a outline right here at the edge of his hat and around his nose. And then that'll clean those lines up a little. I am going to switch to that smaller brush that we use to go around our letters. And I'm going to get a little black on it. Put a little black on both sides. Nice tight bristles. And his hat is dry. So I can do my line around his nose. Now, if you like the look of this line, but this line freaks you out, you could grab a Sharpie and do it. The thing about Sharpies is they will fade fairly quickly. So you may have to touch it up, you know, if it's outside very much or if it's in sunlight. So if it really just drives you nuts, you could do Sharpie. But I recommend doing it in paint. Remember, the softer you press, the smaller the line. So that's about as far as I'm going to go from this side. And see, some people would stop there on his nose. Some people don't do a complete circle when they do body parts. And he's kind of cute with only half of his nose done. So, I don't know. I think his beard's still wet, so I'm going to make sure I don't put my hand in wet beard. But now you can see what an outline looks like on his hat and decide if you want to do it. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. It's like a personal preference thing. It's kind of like salt and pepper. Everybody doesn't like everything the same. So, there's his nose. I'm happy with that. So, that's what it looks like if you do decide to put a line there at the bottom of his hat and around his nose. That would really be all the outlining you had to do because his beard touches his little black shoes. And you wouldn't want to outline around your letters. So, I'm going to do my letters in white. And I'm going to rinse this brush. I'm just not a round brush fan. I don't know. You could probably use a round brush for this part if you wanted to. I guess I could try. Let's see. I'm going to try this round brush. It has a number 5 on it. I'm going to get it wet, get that wax coat off. Scrape, scrape, tap, tap. I am doing my letters in white. So let's see. This might be a good brush for like the cursive parts of the letters. To get paint on a round brush and keep your bristles together, what you do is you lay your brush in the edge of the paint and you roll it like a pencil and kind of pull out of the pile. So see, I still have something that looks round. I don't know if you can see it. Boop, still round, but it's got paint on it. And I am going to maybe do this tea and sweet. Now the white, like his beard, may take more than one coat. But it's kind of like painting your fingernails. Like the first time you go really slow and you make sure you cover everything. And then the second time you can kind of just go quickly and hit down the middle just to darken it up. So something like that would probably work for these two. But I'm going to use that brush in there. And then this little super tiny part of the T probably will switch to like one of the tiniest brushes. I think this one says 2/9 on it. Just want to make sure you get them wet first, tap them off, get that wax coat off. And then, see, I'm rolling him in the white. Maybe even roll him off here some so that he's not chunky. And then I will probably hold my breath. That seems to help. And you can make that little tiny line. I'd make a few of those. And then for the square letters, I probably will switch back to that small flat. Because to me, it's easier to paint square shapes with a square brush. So I'm going to cut away again, work on my letters, and we will be back to see the finished product. All right, I finished painting the letters on my GNOME Sweet GNOME. And one tip that I think I did not mention before is sometimes we will use the back end of the paintbrush instead of the bristle end. We'll use the back end, and you can dip it in paint just like you would a paintbrush, and then kind of scribble in little areas if you need to. That was the best way I found to sneak into these little parts at the bottom of the letters. And then I went back where I needed to with the teal and touched up around the letters. So I think I am done with my little GNOME Sweet GNOME. And I think he's pretty cute, and I hope you had as much fun painting yours as I did. Thanks.